Point of order? Okay. Citizens appearing before council for items not on the agenda. Yes, sir.
Yep.
Yeah, just around there, quasi area about
Yeah,
that.
I put my name in over there. Hi, everyone.
If you could announce your name, that'd be great too, for the record.
My name is Greg Brozovich. I reside in Grand Junction. I'm in Glenwood frequently, typically weekly. I'm here this evening just to call to attention some parking issues that I think the council should address, or maybe in a larger forum with whoever's in charge of parking. I stopped in this afternoon. I spoke with Ryan. He suggested I come. I park frequently on Cooper Street. As you know, there's kind of some funky stuff in terms of parking. The Cafe Marcella puts up an outdoor deck for the summertime, then they take it down in the wintertime. Often I park right in front of that outdoor patio. There's a yellow zone that is in front of the driveway, but the irony is that the driveway is not yellow. It's 14 feet of pavement. My Honda Cross Tour fits exactly between those two yellow markings. There are no signs that say no parking. If you all remember on Cooper Street to the west, I think it's Adventure Sports, there was a yellow zone in there. And I think that the owner had complained that, there wasn't adequate parking, although he owns that lot. The city came in and painted the curb gray or concrete color. Now people can park there. The actual space takes upwards approximately 26 feet. So I think you can get almost 2 cars in there. So I would just like to call to attention. So it's like, fool me once, fool me twice, shame on me, right? So this is last Saturday, and I just don't feel like it's a legitimate ticket. I'm happy to help the city in any way I can. I support local merchants, but I really think some of the parking on Cooper needs to be cleaned up, in particular this zone, because technically it is not a yellow zone. Otherwise, if it is, mark it and write no parking, because there is absolutely no parking. I have plenty of pictures here if you want to see them. So I'm going to email the court tomorrow, let them know that I stopped in to raise this as an issue. And if I could have some leeway on my ticket until it gets resolved, I'm happy to appear before court, but I really just bring this in front of you as citizens of Glenwood Springs and fairly local resident who's here frequently.
Quasi-local.
Quasi-local.
Okay.
Yeah.
Carl, can I ask you a question? Can you contact John Collins to get it?
Yeah, or just call the court.
Yeah. John Thomas, his name's on the front. Okay, will do.
And just so I'm clear, where's this at? I mean, it's on Cooper between 7th and 8th.
So technically the address is, Katie's consignment is 728 Cooper, the local kitchen and coffee.
Okay.
So it's right out front.
Okay.
Yeah. So if you all have time a little later, maybe you can walk by and you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. Masala and curry. Yeah.
But it's the other side of their outdoor dining.
Yeah. It's on the river side of the outdoor dining.
Oh, okay. So between that and local.
Yeah. So don't park there because you might get a parking ticket.
Right.
Or it's a source of revenue for the city. I have no trouble with that, but it's not a legitimate source of revenue.
Not a $20 a pop.
Yeah. Well, and I've got 2 of them, but
No, thank you.
I just, thank you very much for the consideration, and I will email the courts and ask for an extension.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you all very much. Have a nice Labor Day.
You as well.
Anybody else? Okay. Next item is a proclamation on Constitution.
The proclamation on what?
Constitution Week. Who
Oh.
who am I presenting this to? All right, I'm
James Madison?
Okay. It's easy. Whereas is the privilege and duty of the American people to commemorate the 235th anniversary of the drafting of the Constitution of the United States of America with appropriate ceremonies and activities. And whereas Public Law 915 guarantees the issuing of the proclamation each year by the President of the United States of America, designating September 17th through 23rd as Constitution Week. Now therefore I, Jonathan Godis, Mayor of Glenwood Springs, Colorado, do hereby proclaim, golly, September 17th through the 23rd, 2022 as Constitution Week in the city of Glenwood Springs and urge all citizens to study the Constitution and reflect on the privileges of being an American with all the rights and responsibility which that privilege involves. Okay.
Here, here.
Thank you.
All right, I will next entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Move to approve the consent.
I'll second.
Moved by Charlie, seconded by Shelley. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
No.
Motion carries 6-1. All right. First item of action is the GeoGrid easement for BLD Meadows Development.
The what?
GeoGrid easement for
We just did it. We just did it.
Okay.
point of order.
Sergeant at
I
Arms.
know everybody from public thinks he can interrupt.
I'd like Christian to present my item, if that's okay. Kidding. Yes, so this is actually an easement, staff report written by Trent Hyatt, who has moved on to other pastures. I won't say greener, other. So I'm stepping in on this one. This is for the BLD group proposal for 300 units that city council previously approved. And an easement request for something required to construct anchors for retaining walls as part of the development. So Trent included some letters explaining the rationale and necessity for the easement and also dimensions of what's being proposed. So I will keep it incredibly brief, as Trent would, and now open it up for questions.
Go ahead, Paul.
Oh, sorry.
Oh.
No, go ahead. No, you said it. I just pushed my button.
Mr. Mayor, this point of order, sorry, it's supposed to start at 6:35. I think Mr. Lee was gonna be here. And maybe that's changed.
Yeah, I was checking.
We're a little ahead.
Do you want to
Um,
skip?
I am unaware of Chad's attendance, but
Well,
Oh, he's not. Okay,
Is that coming?
okay.
Thank you.
Charlie, did you use a mic?
go ahead, Paul.
But could you just, and maybe, I feel awkward now because it's not Trent, but
I'll do my best.
why couldn't it be on the grantee's property? Why do they have to move into, they have plenty of property out there. And this development has been in development for a while, so I'm just kind of curious. Why needing that 6 or 8 or whatever inches, feet, what?
Just gonna get Trent on the line real quick.
Okay.
Um, And I don't know if Carl will be able to throw me a lifeline on this one. I think just as they presented and as it was approved, this was part of their design. So
And they didn't know at that time they were gonna need to.
Well,
encroach on
actually,
it.
it's a quirk of our development process, honestly. So when we do site plan approval, your final development review approval, we had been, let me back all the way up to, used to be that you had to have all your engineering done before you submitted for a development application. The development community asked us to shift that so that they had certainty on the development application being approved because engineering had become so expensive. I think in this instance, and the applicant can probably speak to this as well, they got site plan approval and then they had to do their engineering, which is what we call final plan approval, which is an administrative approval. Realized that because of the approved site plan, the anchors for this retaining wall were going to have to move on to city-owned property. And so it's kind of a quirk of the process that occasionally we do run into this, but as they can't modify their site plan without going back through the process. So that's why they're here asking for it's effectively a subsurface easement for GeoGrid and nails.
I have a couple more questions. Would this impact drainage in any way whatsoever up there, especially in an alluvial plain?
you know, this has been reviewed by our engineering department and they didn't have concerns in that arena.
Okay, and would this inhibit city developing that property in any way? Or use of that property?
I can't say with 100% certainty that, you know, there is going to be something subsurface, a structure subsurface that would prevent other structures from going in that place. But I think it's small enough along the property line that it would fit within a normal setback that we have for anything else. So I do not believe so.
Thank you, Hannah. Good job, just off the cuff there without.
Ingrid?
You know, really, it's more of a question, I think, for high country engineering, and that is that I think the illustration was deficient of giving us some elevations, because I think that this area is very steep, both the applicant's section as in hence the retaining wall. And I think it would be really helpful for us to have an idea of how significant the grade is. Because that's why I understood the need to go onto the city property, was because of how extensive the grade is. Is that accurate?
I think I'm following what you're asking, but just as a reminder, this particular easement request, the structure is going to be completely subsurface
Yeah.
with no visual
Yeah.
component. But you're talking about in general with
Yeah.
the development itself?
Mhm. Carl's jumping in.
Yeah, I'm gonna interpret.
Okay.
I think what Ingrid's getting at is because of the steepness of the slope, it necessitates retaining walls.
Yeah.
And so the likelihood of being able to build above the retaining wall
Yeah.
is exceedingly low.
That wasn't really a question, but yes, that's
Excellent.
exactly what I was going with it.
I
Yeah.
love Carl's
Thank
interpretation.
you. Carl's my interpreter.
He speaks Ingrid.
Yeah, he does. Yeah. Is that fair? I mean, that's all. Okay, thank you.
Yes, now that I understand, that is absolutely fair.
Anybody else for questions? Go ahead, Shelley.
I have a question just on, so when I look at the site plan, the overall site plan, part of the necessity for the retaining wall being on the city's property is because the roadway that's proposed actually goes almost right to the property line, correct, of the property?
I'm bringing that exhibit up right now, but I believe you are correct.
Okay, okay.
The way it was designed.
All right. So it will, I think with the subsurface structure under there, you know, it needs the soil, from what I understand, and everything to actually support that wall and the soil nails and you know, I'm just trying to understand what's the value of the land being taken from the city essentially on that easement that's given, because it is a substantial piece. It's 30 feet wide by 180, and it's really, the use of it is going to the subdivision, because I don't think that property could be used. You couldn't really excavate on top of it in the future because you might undermine that wall. So I'm trying to understand the complete like trade that's being given here. You know, the city's being asked to give an easement for this, but it seems to me typically when we give a variance or an easement, there's a reason maybe that's not caused by the applicant, but when I look at this and I look at the placement of the road right at the property line, I'm kind of thinking that it's somewhat caused by just the layout of the development. So, and is that true? I'm turning that into a question, sorry.
Long statements.
Yes.
Fishing for the question there. I understand what you're saying, and I can't necessarily speak with the design of how it was laid out if the applicant explored other layouts, but they're operating under the approval that we have given, and so any major changes would have to come back through the process, as Carl mentioned. I
Okay.
do see what you're talking about. It is close to the sunny Aspen Drive.
Right.
I think it might be a question for the applicants and their engineers if there's any other configuration to get around this, but I do not think so.
Okay, thanks.
So they're not here tonight to answer those questions.
We do have a representative, yes.
Okay.
So once you're done grilling me, I'll hand it over to him.
Okay.
As for the the value of the property, you know, we don't have an appraisal for the land area, so I can't give you that, but it is, you know, Brian is here, it's in the parks area, so the likelihood of development here, or what development would even be possible on that type of slope, as Ingrid mentioned, is pretty limited.
Although the slope that slope perpetuates down through the applicant's property. So I'm just wondering if by using that, by giving the easement, essentially that strip of city property becomes part of the, not by ownership, but by easement and use, it becomes part of the development property.
Yeah, I mean, it's a non-exclusive easement for the use of that area for those purposes. And so to the
Right.
extent that any use we might have that wouldn't unreasonably interfere with their use of their easement, we obviously could do. I think,
The surface use.
yeah, the surface use, like whatever we would be doing for parks purposes, I would, it's not zoned or entitled for anything other than that. It's in the portion of meadows that we had identified as not appropriate for development originally when, way back when at the beginning of the annexation process. Certainly it has some value. It's just, from our standpoint and as our office, and I confess Richard drafted the easement, so I'm kind of like Hannah.
Okay.
But no, I mean, I know the easement.
Mhm.
I don't know exactly what that value would be.
Okay.
There is some.
There's always some value. I just, like I said, we didn't feel comfortable trying to, pin a value on it. In some ways, we look at it similarly to a license to encroach, where we typically don't ask for anything other than insurance and naming the city as an additional insured, which we would do here as well. Typically, we don't ask for anything beyond that on a license to encroach. This is a, slightly larger, obviously, because of the length and depth. So an easement was appropriate. It didn't fit within the encroachment provisions, but kind of from our standpoint in drafting it and thinking about it, it had a similar feel to that. So because it's subsurface, and obviously you guys are the ones that get to decide on those things like value.
Hannah, what happens? Sorry, anybody else questions?
Just a silly question.
No.
Okay, you just said value. That's kind of struck with me. Is it common that we could sell this to them? So we don't have to do an encroachment, that if they were to just buy a strip and we do a lot line adjustment?
Well, I could put it on as a ballot question.
That's the only way we can sell land. Way wrong. Okay.
Go ahead.
Question came
Charlie.
up. Yeah, question came up, Carl, has it been used for government purposes? So we have to put it to a vote?
Well, it was designated as parkland, and we have
Oh.
those trails up there, and I don't have it separately designated.
Hannah, if we deny this, what is the steps forward for the applicant at that point?
If this were denied, they'd have to come back with a design that doesn't include utilization of city property, so putting it on their property, which would be a redesign, and most likely, given that magnitude of change, would have to come back for approvals for the project.
Does the applicant have anything to say?
Nothing additional unless there are questions.
I guess I'll just jump in. I think that the question, is it an ordinance?
It's not, but I just didn't, it was in question.
Oh,
You said, are you gonna?
sure. Does anybody from public want to comment on this line? Okay, I just assumed, but maybe I assumed incorrectly. Yeah, I think on the question of value, I think that's a good question. It's obviously problematic to say the least to put this to a vote for a silly thing like this. But I think it does have value, and I think that value is a 10% deed restriction for the units. And so that's what I would suggest if the applicant is interested in this piece of parcel from the city and needs that, then, I think we would ask for something like in that range. And if that doesn't work, I'd be curious what other solutions the applicant might have.
So point of clarification, would that be 10% above what they are currently offering? Or in their development agreement, which is 15 units for the duration of 10 years at 100% AMI rent limitation?
Yes, I would say that is completely separate from the 10 years, whatever thing doesn't really matter. So I would say that we would, potentially annex or axe that and just go with what our existing code is, which is 10%. Nothing more, nothing less.
Thank you for the point of clarification.
And what exactly is that? Was that a motion or was that?
That's open for discussion because
Okay.
Marco doesn't like when I make motions.
Okay, great. Great. Then I would like to jump in next. I'm not going to be able to support a request for a 10% increase. Ultimately, this is parklands above it. You know, if I could see that you had increased the density of your project to make it more economically viable for you and as a developer, I would start to see that maybe there was some financial recourse to us as a community, as a municipality. But ultimately, this is a developer trying to build housing, which we need, who has already agreed to affordable housing units. And in our development code, they've followed the process. They came to us initially, and now through our process where it says they need engineering at the tail end of their development, it's, you know, it became evident that they needed this so that they are doing it correctly, so that we don't have problems with the streets. We don't have sinking buildings. I mean, they're doing it correctly. And now it feels like economically we want to impose more restrictions on them. And I think we need to be mindful as a council that we want to work with applicants who are bettering our community. And they're following the rules within our guidelines. And so ultimately, my request, so I'm not going to be able to support yours, my request would be that, you know, when it comes time to develop the parkland area, maybe you guys could give an extra 30 grand in maybe swing sets or something along those lines, you know, something that there's some recourse, but I don't want to restrict these units of yours and to an additional 10%. I'm just not going to be supportive of that.
Hannah, how many units currently? You said X amount of units for 10 years. How many was that?
15. So
15?
if following code, what our inclusionary zoning would require, which they weren't subject to at the
Right.
time they came in, you'd basically be doubling what they are offering and then
You know
for
what?
longer.
I will amend that, Ingrid, and I'll just say the 15 existing that they have committed for 10 years. If they do that in perpetuity, then that's great for me.
And that is certainly a question
I will
that
make
can't
that
answer, so-
motion if no one else will make that motion. I will make that an official motion. Is there a second? Been moved by myself, seconded by Paula. Further discussion? Go ahead.
I'd just like to say, I do think that there is value to the land that's being given. You know, what it does is it allows the developer to take this roadway right up next to the property line, even on that steep slope, which exists not just on the city property, but all the way across the applicant's property. So it is allowing expanse of their development on the property by use of the city land. And I don't know that that is a value that necessarily the city should give to developers without some type of an equity cost to that land being given, because that land, you know, we may be able to use the surface, but we will not be able to excavate in the future or do anything else with that property. So I think there is a value given, and just as, you know, as an example, and speaking to our city engineer, when we build a roadway, for example, South Midland, you know, we had to pay for every easement where we were doing soil nail walls and things like that. That was something that the city has to negotiate and pay for the use of that property. So I think it's equitable to ask the developer to give some type of reciprocation to the city for the use of that property.
Can I comment on that then really quickly and just ask for the master site plan for this parcel, what is that land identified as?
The city-owned land?
Yeah, the city owned land.
I believe it's identified as park and open space.
Okay. So we didn't really have any plans to develop it for roadways. We don't have plans to develop it as additional housing, commercial. It is just, I'm not to diminish parklands, but that parklands don't historically bring in, and they're not an economic generator for us.
Yes.
You want to respond to that? Okay.
I won't respond to that.
Charlotte.
I agree to some level with what Shelley says, so I think that, you know, nobody gives us land to do if we're gonna Midland and places like that, if we need the easements, things that we either have to get some other compensation or some other consideration. I've been on the other side before. I've been on the city council for a couple of landowners. So I tend to think giving it to them without value is not something that I'm comfortable with. I'm not sure I'm comfortable, on the other hand, with Jonathan's motion. So I'm gonna make a motion that we delay this motion until the next meeting, ask staff to go back and talk to the applicant about what value they may be willing to give in exchange for this easement.
Second.
So don't we have to take a vote on the first motion?
No.
No.
It's a substitute main motion
Okay.
to continue the item to the next regular meeting.
Let's take a, go ahead, Shelley.
Can I ask for, I don't know if you would consider an amendment to that motion, but rather than asking the applicant what they're willing to give, I would ask for staff to try to put some type of value on, turning a portion of the city land into basically part of the developed parcel, which is kind of what we're doing, is allowing them to extend their boundary of development. And just to put some kind of a, so that if we want to have a value to work towards, rather than just saying, applicant, what will you offer?
That's a great point, Shelley. And I think that the intent was that staff go and negotiate with the developer as to how to resolve this.
Great.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
And I would say if that
Okay.
I'm fine.
value is perpetuity on 15 deeds, I don't know, just saying. Good night,
Noted.
Silva. All right, let's take a vote on
I
it.
do have one.
Oh, I'm sorry, Paula.
So just also, I know it's parks and open space right now, but we transition our designations of our zoning. We change, as I have heard on 8th and Midland, we're looking at that property right now for affordable housing. And I'm sure we've all gotten multiple letters about that wasn't what it was designated for. So I understand what
Yeah.
you're saying, but we don't know what's going to happen
Well,
15, 20 years from now on that piece of property. So at this point in time, yes, it's parks, but there is value to it.
but
That's-
we would have to go to a vote of the public to change it from that.
Yeah, hold on a sec. There's a point of order. There's a point of order.
Essentially, it's a motion table. Once
Mhm.
that's
Okay.
made, you vote on that and that ends discussion until next.
Well,
Okay.
I guess, point of order is this discussion on the point of order or on the main motion, alternate main motion.
Yeah, I get the point. From my standpoint, bring back information.
Okay,
Motion table is, you voted the motion table. or not.
Ryan, let's call the question.
I know, it's like going to the races.
Yeah, like what works. But then you don't know. What is that?
Motion passes 6-1. Yes, Counselor Hershey. Yes, Mayor Pro Tem Willman. Yes, Counselor Kaup. No, Mayor Godus. Yes, Counselor Dem. Yes, Counselor Stepp. Yes, Counselor Russo.
Thank you. Trent Hyatt, out.
Thank you, Trent.
I'd like to remind the public that Trent Hyatt is alive.
Where does it work?
All right, item number 11 is adopt the local road safety plan.
Give me a moment. Council, I'm just going to try and bring up a presentation. Oh, no, it's not showing up yet. Slow. Yeah, Jen, thank you. So good evening, council. This is another presentation about the local road safety plan. We had some previous conversations about a grant that we were interested in going for to improve the road safety across the city.
It is that grant and the information that's going into that grant are really a result of the study that we did with FHWA. So I'm going to run for the sake of the public through the study and some of the results from the study. And then again, remind the council of the overall conclusions and where we would hope to go with the grant. And then earlier in the consent agenda, there was a resolution to support the grant. And so I appreciate your passing that. So this effort started in 2017 in conjunction with Garfield County. It really is a FHWA and county-driven effort. But Garfield County invited us to participate and really kind of gave us the lead in this particular development of this safety data across our city. A local road safety plan, as I've described before, is something that really looks at all the different accident types over a period that happen within the city. So it gives you a heat map, I'll call it, of all of the different accidents and the intersections and the types of accidents that occur in the city. The FHWA and I think CDOT's overall purpose, as well as the city's, is to reduce the accident severity. For instance, with the grant and with these projects that we hope to develop, we would look at fatalities and severe accident data first and look at those intersections where those types of accidents occur. The other things that a local road safety plan can do for the city is to help us identify times of year. If we have areas where we have departures from the roadway, we can perhaps identify that maybe we need to paint the roads sooner in the season, those kinds of things, or where we may need additional signage to prevent accidents. In addition, we did look at pedestrian data, as I've mentioned in the past. And so we've got a lot of pedestrian related heat spots where we really want to focus our efforts. The plan will support a lot of our planning efforts. The long range transportation plan, for instance, the comprehensive plan, the State Highway 82 access management plan, as well as those grant requests that we're working on. It actually helped us, just so you guys know, when we went for the Main Street grant for 6th Street, we told them that we had a high incident of of backing out accidents. And so with that, we told them that we would correct the parking configuration and parallel park. And so it was a part of our grant application for that as well. So as I mentioned, our intersections are really a problem within the city. And we do see a higher frequency of pedestrian safety issues. One of the things that we also identified was that there are some distracted driving issues. So I think that when we have a suite of projects, we will also have some things that we would want to focus on from a public education standpoint, perhaps to help us with distracted driving or pedestrian safety or bicycle safety. One of the other things that we looked at was what happens to the city's accident rate when we have closures in the canyons. And what we were able to show is that those closures really do lead to increased accident frequency. So we see additional rear end crashes, pedestrian crashes, driveway crashes, and careless driving crashes. And we believe that those are probably due to frustration and maybe drivers trying to get off of State Highway 82 and go to corridors that they're unfamiliar with. And perhaps the interaction, with other things happening within those corridors, bikes, pedestrians. So this is hard to see, but that bar at the top, the crash frequency by location and severity, that top bar where you see a lot of crashes, that's 14th Street. We know, just from living in the city that, we have a lot of pedestrians at that intersection, both, from a bus stop standpoint, as well as the high school. And the next highest intersection in that little graph is 8th Street. And so you can see a lot of pedestrian accidents there, and 10th Street, 21st Street, 24th Street. So these just give us an idea of where we're having a high frequency of accidents, as well as the type of accident. And so
suspected serious accidents are the darker orange. Possible injury, and then property, it's the green, and then property damage is the blue. So we hope that in looking at with the grant and looking at these accident frequencies and locations, as well as RAFTA's data. RAFTA has agreed to supply us their accident history, so we'll be able to take that and really look at some of the bus stop data as well. So we did have a higher than normal, well, higher than peer city and higher than statewide average percentage of crashes at intersections. We also have a higher than statewide average and also higher than peer city average of fatalities. So I think that this gives us a good place to start in evaluating our safety across the city. So this is where we gather data from. We looked at traffic violations, we looked at 911 emergency data, maintenance logs, we looked at the safe routes to school routes, and again, the transit routes, as well as a lot of data on CDOT's website. Again, 81 rear end crashes along the corridor. And again, this is over a period from 2017 to 2021, where we looked in depth at all of these accidents. A number of those were during peak hours and closures. One of the approaches is to improve our messaging and signs, especially when we have canyon closures, to reduce frustration. To try to tell drivers that, we're expecting to clear in a certain amount of time. Again, we should work on pedestrian safety campaigns in both English and Spanish. One of the things, actually, Councilor Hershey sent me recently, proposed that we have a leading pedestrian interval at some of our signals. And I think that that's a good idea. I think that when we look at this data with CDOT and start to work on our project solutions, I hope that when we look at the idea of taking some of our downtown signals, we're able to take that timing and move it towards progressive ideas like leading pedestrian cycles. One of the other things that was proposed in this article that Councilor Hershey sent me was clearing our sight distances out of corners. And that's something we work on all the time. But I think that, again, this gives us a good reason to do it. This is our crash map. You can see, again, 2017 to 2021, a very high frequency along Grand Avenue there. A lot of those are rear end accidents. You can also see that crashes during closures are high frequency as well. So we work on safety all the time. We have in the past installed RFBs at a lot of our intersections where we have high pedestrian use and high vehicular use. We did that with the Grand Avenue Bridge, specifically on routes that we knew school children would travel.
What's an RRFB?
It's a rapid flashing beacon, rectangular rapid flashing beacon, rapid flashing beacon. Thank you. We are also very interested in grade separated crossings. We put one in ahead of the Grand Avenue Bridge at West Wolfson, Grand Avenue underpass, the 27th Street underpasses. We've also placed new sidewalks in a number of locations. Again, our pedestrian bridge installations, I think isolating our pedestrians from our roadway system is very important. So these are some of the things that we think that we can do and should do as we look at these safety issues. Pedestrian crossing improvements, bike lanes, leading pedestrian intervals, medians and pedestrian refuges. I think I mentioned that in specific, about Grand Avenue, places where we have a high volume of pedestrians, trying to create a place where they can be safe in the center median, plus shortening that distance that they have to cross is what I'd really like to do.
What's a road diet?
So it looks like Highway 6 or what 6th Street will be. Right now, we've got a lot of room in there, and we're going to expand those sidewalks and the bike lanes and press the vehicles in. We're going to narrow those lanes and just make it so that drivers are less comfortable driving. Yeah. Roundabouts, some people hate them, but they, from a pedestrian standpoint, and from a vehicular standpoint, there are less points where there are potential collision points. This is just a graphic that shows, what happens to pedestrians at a certain rate of speed. As you can imagine, the higher the speed, the more likely that the pedestrian won't fare well. This graphic, the sight distance graphic, I think is important for us. We talked a lot about speed on Grand Avenue, and a lot of complaints about being in excess of our 25-mile-an-hour speed limit. That graphic shows that the faster you go, the narrower your field of vision, so you don't see as much on the sides. The slower you go, the wider you can see if you're looking for pedestrians, bicycles crossing. So these are some of the things that we talked about with the grant. I'd like to reduce the number of signals along Grand, to look at trying to reduce some of those rear end accidents, and also to give us additional signal timing at some of our higher volume pedestrian crossings. I would like to put in medians. I'd like to change the idea of people trying to cut across the road to go in the opposite direction, and put with those medians, reduce the feel of the corridor, put Grand Avenue on a road diet, and make the vehicles begin to travel slower. Also with these, that idea of a road diet on Grand Avenue, I'd like to look at, additional bulb outs and reconfiguration of our intersections, so that it makes it harder. You have to think harder when you're making that turn, just so that we can try to keep the pedestrian safer out there. At Midland and 27th, that roundabout is designed incorrectly. It really allows speed through the roundabout. If we get this grant, we would look at expanding the center apron and trying to force the vehicles out farther and slow them down. We'd also probably put RFBs out there, and there are a number of pedestrians crossing in that area because of the terraces and Cottonwood Landing, access to the trail there. Midland Avenue in West Wolfton is also one of the areas where we had a fatality. The sight distance is poor and the speeds are high. We also have a lot of transit through that intersection. So it's one of the intersections that we'd like to take a closer look at.
Carrie, is that the one by Lowe's?
It is actually adjacent to RAFTA. So if you're trying to access
sure.
the RAFTA, it's West Wolfton is that far west intersection.
Thanks.
Devereaux Road is another one of those intersections that we want to take a closer look at. We have a bus stop there and a lot of people moving through that intersection for the park.
Which one is that?
So Devereaux and 6 right there, and 6th.
Six.
Yeah. I know we had I guess a complaint / concern about the roundabout at Laurel recently, and it's related to pedestrians. I did send that concern off to CDOT and let them know that we saw that. I think that when CDOT is involved in this process, it will give us another forum and hopefully more push to try to correct those kinds of issues. In my opinion, it's going to be better to shift that crossing a little bit to the west if we can. CDOT doesn't really like to have RFBs that are really close to a roundabout. They affect the performance of the roundabout, and they also cause rear end accidents if people stop in the roundabout to allow a pedestrian to cross. So a trade-off of accident types, but it will be a topic that we can bring up through the safety project. So again, we are on the September 15th, we'll submit for that Safe Streets for All grant program. And it'll be the first phase where we'll take the accident data that we have, and we'll go in depth on some of those accident types, pedestrians and transit, and then develop a suite of projects and probably educational campaigns to address some of those accidents. There are other types of funding that we'll be looking at, highway safety program, as well as safe routes to school. And we also recently applied for a first and last mile funding grant through REFTA. In that case, we're going to look at pedestrian facilities on Blake. With that,
I have a question.
does the council have any questions about our projects or the program?
I do. So CDOT have they been involved in any of this up to date, up to this point?
Yeah, no, we've had conversations with RAFTA, with CDOT, and with the school district. They all reviewed the scope of the grant, and I think that they will follow us through this process. They were willing to share data with us for the signal timing, and I think they're very interested in trying to make this go as well.
So Terry, my sense is, this is just from, earlier requests that we slow down the speed limit after 27th Street, and our earlier request to change the timing. Are we going to, are they going to embrace that we need to do something to protect our pedestrians and our bike traffic?
I think they will. They are limited by attorneys like all of us. I think with I'm sorry, Carl. In the case of the speed issue, they set speed with a certain formula.
I understand that, but it still doesn't embrace the fact that they're in a town. So that's my concern.
Yeah, I understand. And I think with these types of projects, we can give them a good reason to help support us. Signage only goes so far with a speed limit. And I think the better approach, I think the more effective approach is to make the driver uncomfortable. I use the example of I-70 where you can, do 75 or 80 and you've got a very clear vision. You feel the vision, you feel comfortable at that speed versus, really any speed, any street in this town. Responsible drivers feel uncomfortable because they know that there are things that are adjacent to them. And so I want to have more of that feeling on Grant. I want to narrow the corridor and make drivers uncomfortable and not rely on a sign to say, here's the speed limit, and whether it's 25 or whether they feel comfortable going 35. I want them to feel uncomfortable. So.
And I hope that's the case because I've seen some pretty wicked things going on. But here's my concern is also on the pedestrian lights. And I want them to work with us on that. When you say, well, CDOT doesn't want to do the flashing lights right at the roundabout because it inhibits traffic. And I would love to see this safety take the aspect of pedestrian and bicycles first, not traffic flow first. I'd rather have a signal at every intersection in town. I'm just like, slow them down, slow them down, slow them down. So I would like CDOT to embrace that as well when they start working with us. And so I'm hoping that we can, I don't know how to, that's not a question, it's a comment. I just would like to see
No, I agree.
that kind of engagement.
Other questions?
Well, Paul made a comment. Can I make kind of a comment question?
Can we
Sorry.
try to
Well, she
limit it
did.
question? Yeah.
Okay, so I guess.
If we can
some
limit it
things
to
are fair for
questions
some
first,
people
go
and
around.
Not for others
Go ahead, Charlie.
who delay meetings endlessly.
Terry, I appreciate all the hard work and I read through this several times and, well, not several, I read through it twice and went back and looked at it. You're asking us to adopt the local road safety plan. I read this. I don't know what I'm adopting. And to me, a plan is we're gonna do it 1, 2, 3, 4. Maybe I'm just too lineal. But this looks like a lot of aspirational stuff and really doesn't a plan. And I'm worried about getting locked in because it's a policy statement. So what's the basic question is, what's the plan we're adopting if we approve this?
So I think what the adoption of the local road safety plan will do,
Not what it'll do, what
what it means to
What are
adopt
we
it.
adopting? Are we adopting that we're gonna put medians in Grand Avenue, that we're gonna put flashing lights on? What are we adopting here? Because this is a significant, could be a significant policy statement that we're making. I don't know what I'm approving.
So what it does is outlines all of the safety issues within the town and really makes a commitment to addressing those is really all that it does. It says, we've got these types of issues. We'd like to look forward and figure out a way to address all of these different issues.
Thank you.
Other questions? Go ahead.
What were the Transportation Commission's thoughts on this?
They supported the idea of the grant and I think the local road safety plan. We haven't had a conversation with them in a couple of months, but
Mhm.
they voted to move it forward and thought the grant was a good idea.
Okay, thank you.
Sean?
And I'll just add on to Ingrid's question, what will their role be going forward?
The Transportation Commission?
Yes. Will they have a role?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. Okay.
We're just beginning this process. So I think that, we're going to apply for the grant on the 15th of this month. And if we get the grant, I think what we'll do is we'll begin a process of evaluation of all of the accident data. They want to look at, the intersections, the types, and identify what the causes of the accidents were. Because what we have is, we know where they occurred. We don't specifically know what the cause was. And so they'll look at each cause and they'll try to correlate that, a specific cause at a specific place could be addressed in this way. And then we'll come up with a suite of projects. And I imagine when we're doing that, not the evaluation of the accident data, but with the ideas that come from it, that would be a place where we would bring it back to the Transportation Commission and say, this is what we see. These are the possible suite of options. What do you think of that?
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions? And Terry, I think when you presented something like this the first time, I had a question about the 27th Street roundabout in Midland. And I guess I'm just kind of questioning, for the amount of traffic that gets, there really isn't a high incident rate there. So I guess why does that make the top priorities?
It's just one of the intersections we want to look at. There are, let me flash back to the,
And I mean, I've heard the argument from Brian Smith about the retaining wall and visuals staying over it and trying to maintain it. Like, I get that, but from a flow and standpoint question versus and I guess the bigger question is the amount of use it gets versus the very small number of incidences. Do we have the data there that really supports that being a top priority?
I would want to look closely at the accidents that we have there and determine whether we really want, we obviously have a lot of accidents on Grand Avenue, and I think that should be a first focus. But we do have accidents in that roundabout, and I would want to look at the causes and the severity. I think that one of the focuses of this plan will be really to try to hit the worst accidents, the most severe. And if we have those in 27th, and I can't say the right net at this moment, that one of those dots indicates a high severity, I would want to look at that. I do, you drive that every day. I drive that every day. I am a little bit afraid of those pedestrians that move on all legs of that roundabout. I think that the roundabout approaches are steep. And in some cases, the sight distance isn't good for some of those approaches for pedestrians. So if there are pedestrian accidents in that roundabout, I want to see if I can fix them. I'm not as concerned about vehicular accidents in that location.
Gotcha. I think I'm just going so fast, I don't see him.
You're one of our colleagues.
Any other questions? Thank you. Any?
I
Oh,
have
sorry.
one
Yeah.
last question, and that is that by adopting this, we're not necessarily financially and, committing, but we have a better position in order to get grants. Is that an accurate statement?
So yes, we can't even submit for the Safe Roads for All program without the adoption of a local
Okay.
road safety plan.
Okay, great. So I think if there aren't any other questions and everybody is comfortable.
Nope.
No.
I'd like to open it for public comment.
Okay, great.
And I would like to make a
Okay.
There we go.
Any public comment on this item? I will bring it back for motion.
Mr. Mayor, if I may, I'd like to move to adopt the local safety plan as presented, the local road safety plan as presented by City Engineer Terry.
Been moved by Marco, seconded by Ingrid. Further comment? Yes, Tony.
Harry, thank you for reading that article. I think what you saw in that community is we have a lot of. Thank you, Christian. We have a lot of issues with some of these blind spots. I can think of one at Blake and City Market when you're headed north, when you're leaving the City Market parking lot. There are a lot of situations like this every single day on 11th and Grand when I'm walking my dog or in that area by the marijuana store, by the ice cream store. Someone gets sick of waiting for that traffic light, particularly on Saturdays and Sundays, and just decides I'm going to cross. And the lights are green and they don't anticipate the speed of the traffic on Highway 82, and that is a highway, and somebody's going to get killed. And as you know, there have already been deaths on Glen and on 82 down there. And the chief knows about the number of accidents, pedestrians versus cars. And unfortunately, the cars always win.
Hey, Tony,
And
just real quick, is this relevant
Yes.
to the motion?
Yes.
Okay, we're gonna go over
I'm
intersection.
not finished.
Okay.
Thank you. So my comment, and with regards to this motion, is if the safety plan could address what you talked about with pedestrians, but also, I mean, I just think that CDOT is as a dead ear. It's Sunday morning at 7 a.m. If I want to go get a cup of coffee at Deja Vu and want to cross by Axel Park, there's absolutely no reason that I should have to stand there for 3 or 4 minutes. I understand at rush hour and during the week and the amount of traffic, and CDOT wants to move that traffic efficiently for town. There's no cars, but then a car comes out of no one and somebody's going to get hurt. So if you could just make sure that that's something they can address, and I appreciate your hard work on this. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes. Actually, Paula was next. Sorry, Charlie.
Do you have, you want, I'm fine. Yeah, no, it's just a comment. Thank you for bringing this to us. I think it's really important that we consider this road safety plan moving forward. I want to reiterate, though, I was going to bring this up at council comments. Frank and I were crossing 27th Street on our bikes with the pedestrian light, and Frank was this close from getting hit by a car. Another car came up behind me and went behind me as we were crossing with the pedestrian light. So I really encourage a focus on pedestrian and bike traffic, not on just the cars and how we can enhance the flow of things. I'd like to see that.
Agree. I think it has to be the primary focus of the plan.
Thank you.
Charlie.
I'm gonna have to vote the way the motion is worded. I'm going to get because I still don't know what we're about.
Could you hit your mic?
Oh, thank you.
And talk up?
Yes, thank you for both those things. I'm going to probably vote against the motion the way it's structured. So I'm going to suggest, if you would, an amendment that we're adopting a local road safety plan that identifies safety issues and commits us to addressing those safety issues. Because that's what it says. Otherwise, I don't know what we're approving, and I'm gonna have to vote against it.
Okay, see no more comments. Ryan, let's call the question.
My life. Only got to hit a couple buttons.
Yes, Counselor Hershey. No, Mayor Pro Tem Willman. Yes, Counselor Kaup. Yes, Mayor Godus. Yes, Counselor Dem. Yes, Counselor Stepp. Yes, Counselor Russo. It passes 6-1.
Thank you.
Thanks, Terry.
Thank you, DDA.
Really, Jillian, you stayed around for that. That was the meat for you tonight, huh? Okay. Appreciate it. It's nice having you. All right. Gosh, what layup do we have next? Oh, ballot language. Okay, item number 12, resolution 2022-34, ballot language.
Good evening, Mayor and members of council. I'm here to present Resolution 2234. On August 18th, council voted to place a 2.5% increase in lodging tax on the ballot. And that was at the recommendation of the Glenwood Community Workforce Housing Coalition. And that group represents more than 20 volunteer residents, members of the business community, including hotels, representatives from Valley Settlement and other nonprofits. And I know that Carl will go through the various options related to the ballot language. Just wanted to point out a couple of things. In the staff report, it says that we anticipate that this would generate $1.5 million. And actually, if we go to the top, if we have the best year ever, it's more like 2.5%. And that's what we would like to have 2.5 million to put into the ballot language, because we don't want to have to rebate any of those dollars. So it's the best possible scenario at 2.5 million. And there also is a separate item that is enabling legislation, which is separate. So we're happy to talk about any of those things together or separately. This is a resolution, so it is not a public hearing. However, the next item, which is the ordinance for the enabling legislation, is. And with that, I'm open to any questions you may have.
Charlie?
I would move to approve resolution 22-34 with exhibit A. With the following change at the bottom of page 1, where it says, and other direct expenses of the city to implement these programs, it should read, and other direct expenses the city used solely to implement these programs, delete the words exclude any administrative cost, and continue with such text to end. And the purpose of making this motion is we've had a citizens group come to us.
Can we get a second before we go on?
Second.
Okay, go ahead, Charlie.
The purpose of this is we had a citizen group. We asked to come to us, tell us how to do this. They propose this to us. I think we have to let them take it the way they want to do it. Let them go to the voters and see if they get this approved. So I don't think we start tweaking what they've spent 4 or 5 months studying.
But you did make one, is that correct in your motion?
Pardon?
You did make one tweak in your motion.
Yeah,
Charlie.
I believe the language that Charlie suggested is in the final full paragraph after the bullet points. That it would now read, and other direct expenses of the city used solely to implement these programs, such tax to end in fiscal year 2042.
Motion and a second. This is a resolution, so do we need to take public comment?
If there is public comment, I would be receptive.
Yeah, and
Is there
Tony
any
has
pub-
his hand up at the end as well.
Well,
Do we want to take public comment before we give comments from the dais? I'm asking council.
Can I make a question to legal on the motion? Is this
Sure.
the best time or? Okay,
As a point of order, I think that's a great point of order to have to clear up whether we want to. Go ahead.
okay. So Carl, could you explain what the significance would be to the administration and of these funds if we take out that wording excluding any administrative costs?
Sure. I think that the change is, the original language is sort of suggested by the group. They were trying to make sure that there wasn't a bleed over into, I think, other programs, and just like all of a sudden you wind up with a half dozen people working and we don't have anything going vertical. And they were very focused on wanting to make sure things happened.
Right.
And I think the change probably clarifies that if you had something like a project manager that could be interpreted as an administrative expense, even though that is a direct expense of a project going vertical, that I think the change eliminates an argument over whether or not having a project manager on a construction project is an administrative cost that's permitted underneath the ballot language or not. I think that is kind of the area that I would see most clearly we would run into this, because we're really talking about direct expenses of the program.
Okay, but it still has to be direct and.
Still has to be direct expenses, right? And so that would mean, there may be, say, some accounting costs that are a direct expense there, again, of going vertical with a project that are housed in our finance department. That is a direct cost of that project. I think that would be an appropriate cost. funding a position in finance just because we needed a position in finance out of the fund would not be a direct cost, and so wouldn't be permissible underneath.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody from the public like to give comment? See none. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Carolyn. I'd be a little quicker on the draw.
I didn't know if I needed to say anything. Carolyn Meadowcroft, I live at 659 Dolores Circle in Glenwood Springs. I just have just a short little letter to read from the Housing Coalition. So what we basically want to say is that since January, our coalition of residents, businesses, and civic leaders have worked very hard together to shape a program designed to make more housing in Glenwood Springs affordable to our workforce. Together, we researched other local housing programs, evaluated potential sources, uses, and levels of funding. And in early August, we delivered our final recommendations to you, which is what you've read. Tonight, you will vote on the ballot language that allows our community the opportunity to put our planning into action. We urge you to move forward with the language that reflects our recommendation, including a 20-year sunset, which provides accountability our voters deserve, yet also creates a meaningful resource we can deploy and leverage. We are eager to begin the work of informing our community about the opportunity we have to make housing more affordable for our workforce this November. As a community-driven initiative, our efforts to move this forward can only be successful if we are campaigning on the program we designed and requested to be put on the ballot. We appreciate your support in this important work. Respectfully, the Glenwood Community Housing Coalition.
Thank you, Carolyn.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, there is a motion on the table and a second. Tony, go ahead.
I have a number of amendments, Mr. Mayor. How would you like me to proceed?
Go ahead and start making motions.
I would move first that the programs supported here to are exclusive, and this would be added to the bullet points, are to be, and I've provided you guys with this, are exclusively built in and benefit only persons within the city of Glenwood Springs.
Is there a second? Motion dies for lack of second.
I would also ask that another bullet point be, and housing built can only be utilized by those working in the city limits of Glenwood Springs.
Is there a second? Motion dies for lack of second.
I would also ask that we add a bullet point to include language that adds mortgage assistance.
Is there a second? Motion dies for lack of second.
Changes to language, and this is the language of the ballot question. Remove purchasing real property from the provisions.
Is there a second? Motion dies for lack of second.
Finally, or not finally, next to finally, penultimately, is that?
Penultimate.
Or
Yeah.
quasi?
No, it's not quasi.
Okay.
I'm asking that we shorten the sunset. This is way too long. I would make a motion that we change this to 2032 instead of 2042.
Is there a second? Motion dies for lack of second.
And this is the final one, Mr. Mayor. I would ask that we remove, and you see this in the first paragraph, hotel room, guest house, lodging room, motor room, motel room, hotel room, and only include short-term rentals for this tax.
Is there a second? Motion dies for lack of second.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That's all I have.
Thank you, Tony. Is there anybody else?
Comment.
Yep.
Do we need to incorporate the language as suggested by Jen Uten that puts the 2.5 million max into our motion for language? Is that something that needs to be on the ballot?
It does. It probably wouldn't hurt if whoever, I can't remember who made the motion, to amend that to include 2.5 million in the opening line. That's our high estimate.
Oh, and then
For
the
the
blank
taper, for the
question.
taper amount.
Okay.
That's fine. I have no
Great.
problem.
But it's not in there right now. So-
No, that's
It's
what I'm
not in there right
asking.
now.
If Charlie would
Yeah.
amend and the second would amend.
I think
so
it
that
was-
it's
yeah.
2.5.
So
And then I have one other comment, and that is
I
that
have a question on that real quick, because it's just tangential to that 2.5. Is that okay, or do you want to finish your comments?
I want to finish my comments.
Great.
Thank you. I think that Council Hershey brought up some very good points, and I certainly don't want to dismiss a lot of them. But ultimately, I am taking direction, as I historically have, from our ad hoc committee of And I appreciate all the work you guys put into it. So I will honor your request and have this reflect exactly what you have asked.
Charlie?
And I've got to echo Ingrid's comment. I think that, some of the things that Tony proposed, maybe places we might even want to look at, do we want to put in those things in the ordinance rather than ballot questions? We also have we have a limit of words that go to the ballot question, all the stuff wouldn't fit in there. So I'm not so saying that because I didn't second it, I don't support some of the things that Councilman Hershey set forth. And I think we're going to talk about the ordinance here next. So.
Can I just make a quick comment about that?
I'd like to go through everybody's comments first.
Okay.
Thanks. Any other comments?
Yes, there aren't any, so can I make a quick comment? Fine.
Shelley?
I would like to make one more comment, and that speaks to, I was particularly pushing for a longer sunset, just looking to give us time to really create affordable housing in the community. But once again, I respect where the ad hoc committee is coming from, and I respect their comments about keeping it to a 20-year sunset. So I'm willing to support this motion. Thank you.
And I just have a question that might also be a comment, and then I will get to you, Tony. I just want to get everybody through first. I'm a little concerned about the 2.5 million. That is such an overestimation of what we possibly could collect, in my opinion. I mean, we have budgeted 1.5. I know that we went really, we don't want to rebate this, but Carl, from a Tabor standpoint, the implications of if we undershoot this means we either have to stop collecting at some point in the year or find a way to either rebate or put it to some other public good use that has a rational nexus in it, correct?
It does. And, we talked about that at the staff level. And we all remember the tobacco tax that we estimated, we doubled, we added to, and we almost had to rebate. And so I think what it is for, I think Steve and I is reflective of, there's a lot of uncertainty. Everybody's saying next year is going to be really awful. We're all hopeful that it's not, and we could see something that we don't expect. And so from my standpoint, and Steve can speak to how he came up with the estimate. I'd rather be overly conservative and overestimating, and also making sure that people, it just, like I said, I would rather be conservative and overestimating. I certainly will follow council's direction, but Steve, you want to talk about how you?
Sure. And I agree, it's a high estimate. The uncertainty I think that we've got is a number of things. Number one, this SUT system, the state sales and use tax system, is going to start collecting lodging tax. That may increase it. We're getting together, deals with marketplace facilitators, like the kayaks of the world and, short-term rentals of the world. There's a lot of different revenue streams that could materialize next year. Do I think it would hit 2.5 million? Probably not, but I didn't think that we'd, collect $900,000 in tobacco tax either. It's just hard to know.
Yeah, I know. And I think that we had no idea. We have a really good precedent of what we've collected though for lodging tax from last year, this year, the last, 30 years, we have a pretty good record. And my only concern for this council is that we really were conservative also with the street tax in 2019. And people said, wow, that's $90 million over the next 20 years. I worry 2.5 times 20 years is pretty easy, and say 50 million. That sounds like a big number. It's not hard to do that math. I know, I agree. So that's why I'm just a little hesitant. If people want to keep it there, I just want to be very cautious about, doing something that's so far out of the range of whatever even, we've ever done by a factor of like 50%. So that's my only comment on that. But if we want to keep it at 2.5 to be conservative, and we're not as worried about the campaign and people overestimating and using that against us, then I think that's fine. Any other comments?
Just real quick.
Yes, sorry.
I just wanted to clarify on this. The issue here that we are missing on this short-term rental is people are renting their homes because they can make more money on short-term rental. I would support what Aspen is doing at just a tax, because what that will do is drive houses back into the market. People are not renting their homes. So that's why I think we should just be addressing the short-term rental. I appreciate the 6 of you reading these. I hope in the future, particularly if this should pass or fail, that you can consider some of these ideas when I'm not here. Thanks. Bye. I mean, not bye, but thanks when I'm not on council. You know what I mean? Do you know what I mean?
I was just hoping.
You're just.
All right. Any other comments? All right, Ryan, let's call the question.
Yes, Counselor Wusso. Yes, Counselor Stepp. Yes, Counselor Dem. Yes, Mayor Godus. Yes, Counselor Kaup. Yes, Mayor Pro Tem Willman. No, Counselor Hershey. It passes 6-1.
Thank you, Carolyn. Please pass on our sincere appreciation, overwhelming and sincere appreciation to everybody that's been on your committee. Thank you. And good luck.
Mr. Mayor, from now, or Mr. Mayor, or Mr. Hamlin, Title I, the Colorado statute prohibits any kind of campaign from the dais. Once this is passed,
Right.
we have to stop.
Yeah, I'm not sure that was overstepping, but the things that you can do, you can, and it's been found totally fine, is if at some point you want to adopt a resolution of support, as we have done in numerous instances on other ballot measures and things like that, unrelated to our own. You may want to do that. If you do, I'd probably do that second meeting in October. Just as it's a good timing. And also we would have it drafted by then because I don't have it tonight. But as far as campaigning, Councilor Hershey is correct from the dais. I would encourage you, it's out there, it's done from your standpoint of you as a council. You individually obviously can campaign on your own time without city resources as much as you would like to.
If I wasn't clear, I meant from the dais.
Mr. Mayor.
Yeah.
I agree with Councilman Hershey. I don't think any of us should comment on this proposal. The citizens group is there. That's their job. It shouldn't be our job to do this at all. Any 7 of us, one way or the other. I think it ought to be up to the voters to decide if they think this is important enough to the city.
Okay, item number 13. We have an
Okay,
ordinance.
before I want one more comment, and that is that I would ask that, when I took an effective leadership class at the very beginning of my council stint, and it encouraged us to disseminate only the council's voice because the council has a voice of one. So I would strongly encourage us, unless we make a resolution of support, that we all stay out of this, including editorials and things along those lines.
Well, but Mr.
Item number
City Attorney,
13,
to address that.
ordinance 2022-22. We're going to move on now.
I'm allowed.
We're moving on. If it's related, we have to move on. I mean, we can talk about this all night if we want, but we do need to move on.
She's misstated the law.
Ordinance 2022 is there, let's see, who's presenting this?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Before you have the beginnings of the implementation ordinance that would become effective if and only if the ballot question you just put on the ballot were to pass. I actually am going to suggest on this, I know some of you have been through the language. We kicked around a little bit earlier in the day at the work session, the possibility that this would be an appropriate work session material, maybe at the first meeting in October. Obviously, there's probably a section missing, which is some of the constraint language, and I did that consciously because I wanted to have a conversation with you. But I also thought it was important to get the first reading done on this. So my suggestion is, if council is comfortable, is that we move this forward on first reading. We set it for a work session on the October.
Point of order. I'm trying not to be here the second meeting of
Right, no,
October.
it's on the first meeting.
Okay.
And I'm hoping we'll have time in the middle of that day if we work out some of those details to probably get, well, let me back up. Probably we should find some time on September 15th if we can, in the afternoon, a half an hour to work on this. And then we'll get it on the first meeting in October.
That good for everybody? Okay.
This is first reading, so it will be a public hearing.
Right. Is there any questions? Seeing none, we'll turn it over for public comment. Seeing none, we'll bring it back for motion.
Make a motion. I'll make a motion to approve ordinance 2022-22 enabling legislature for new ballot measure.
Moved by Counselor Wusso, seconded by Counselor Dame.
I would ask for an amendment on that, if I can, just reflecting what our legal just said, that, you know, that we're going to have a work session in the September
September
15th meeting.
It doesn't absolutely have to, but if you want to give me that direction,
guess-
that would be fine.
To work through some of the restraint language and work through details.
So let me amend my motion to reflect the work session date as suggested by legal counsel.
Okay, thank you.
You said September 15th?
Yeah, I think we're gonna have to do it. We're gonna need to do it on the 15th only because we do need to get, it's a second reading, so I would like to get the final language out and available in the packet if we could.
I'd have no problem. I guess my comment's gonna be, well, better be prepared for a long meeting. We have the general fund budget and A and I to discuss that same meeting. Those are not simple budgets, so we're gonna be meeting longer that day. Everyone should plan that day as a longer day.
Ryan, let's call the question. What's that? Sorry, did somebody have? I don't think we said something about the morning, did we? Okay. Mark, are you gonna vote on it? Oh, yes.
We're voting, yes.
Did I do that wrong?
Yes, you did.
What did I do?
As a follow-up to that, so that we're prepped for that, if you guys have comments, go ahead and send them to me.
Okay, thanks.
Yes, Counselor Wusso, yes, Counselor Stepp, yes, Counselor Dem, yes, Mayor Godus, yes, Counselor Kaup, yes, Mayor Pro Tem Willman, no, Counselor Hershey. It passes 6-1.
Sorry if I was confusing there. Yeah.
I'm an old lady, 5 minutes.
You can have 8. We will come back here at 7:54.
Thank you.
I'm glad that didn't pick
I
up.
lost my.
Item number 14. Oh, this is mine. The endorsed Make a Colorado Affordable ballot issue. So I will present this. This is issue 108. This is going to be on the ballot in November. There's several articles in the packet that hopefully you've read. I also sent out, I believe, a ballotpedia thing to some of you. That kind of was a little bit less reportive and more just specific. Here's what it is. Here's what it's involved. I've read maybe a little bit more than those articles combined. It was a topic of conversation at the cast meeting that I just attended in Salida. If folks have a question about it, the reason I would like to put I put it on this agenda, and I would like for us to contemplate endorsing it, is because it is not a new tax. It just impacts the potential refund of Tabor that would have to go back anyway. So it's not taking out of K through 12. It's not taking out of, the state highway patrol budget. And it's significant. 200 million. I mean, it's a lot of money. And the thing that I like about this is it tags it to 60% AMI for rentals and 100% AMI for home ownership. And it goes to communities as matching grants. So hopefully, and I really wanted it on this agenda because hopefully what we just did about 15 minutes ago, not hopefully, potentially, there will be more funding available in the future of Glenwood Springs in some way or shape or matter, hopefully. And if that's the case, then we will be well positioned to take advantage of not just federal money that's coming down that the federal government has passed, but also significant hundreds of millions of dollars that the state has allocated. And so for that reason, I think we should support this. Does anybody have any questions for me? Or I don't know if Carl's looked at this at all either, but
I have a question.
Yeah.
On this 3%, they have to have a commitment to increase the number of affordable units by 3% annually.
Yeah.
So does that put us off for like 3, 4, or 5 years before we can even get to that point? Because that's a huge increase of affordable housing for us.
So I don't know the particulars because I think after this passes, there's a lot that will have to be, the rules will have to be, and then these grants will be made. But right now, I don't know what they consider the existing 3%, but if we're starting from 3%, I don't know. And we're not, so, we do have in the community, Glenwood Greens, we have Catholic Charity, we do have like 100 or so. So 3% making a commitment doesn't necessarily mean, over the course of 10 years, or I'm sorry, the course of 3 years, that would mean we would only add 10 units. And I think that if we're getting, $1 million or $2 million or even $500,000 from the state to do that, I think that's something that is actually a pretty low bar.
Okay.
Charlie?
Just more of a comment. After Jonathan brought this up, I reached out to Megan Dollar, who's the chief lobbyist for CML. We just had a subcommittee meeting on housing for the CML. And one of the things we're looking at is continuing sources of funding for affordable housing. And we're going to be discussing this again. Unfortunately, I'll miss the CML board meeting because we're going to be interviewing candidates, but it's going to come up at the policy meeting in October. But Megan believed that there would be support coming out of the board, and CML will be supporting this ballot issue as well.
Shelley?
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Mr. Mayor, does this affect, can you explain how this affects Tabor and Tabor refunds and where the money would come from?
Not probably well, but as I understand it, that, in a year where there is more, it's kind of the ratchet effect where the state goes down if there's a recession, but then when it grows disproportionate and collects too much money, they refund people. This would be, it's not a new tax on anybody. It's not existing budget. It just impacts that refund that folks would get. So with that, would anybody like to make a motion of support of a statewide affordable housing and issue 108?
So moved.
There's a second. Moved by Charlie, seconded by Shelley. Further comment? Ryan, let's call the question. I did it, must have done it right that time. Everybody's waiting on it.
Yes, Counselor Wusso. Yes, Counselor Stepp. Yes, Counselor Dem. Yes, Mayor Godus. Yes, Counselor Kaup. Yes, Mayor Pro Tem Willman. No, Counselor Hershey. 6-1.
Thanks, guys. Item number 15, approval of request for proposal of 2022-07 Community Center Tennis Court Restoration Change Order. That's why John's.
Good evening, council. We have a change order in regards to our tennis court renovation project. When we first started the project, we had a structural engineer, Kumar, come and do some exploratory borings. We did 5 of those around the perimeter and in the middle of the courts to look at what the conditions of the subbase were. We found that they were poor soils, but it looked like we had about 6 to 8 inches of possibly usable subbase that could be used for additional fill once we had graded that out. As we got into the project and dug additional exploratory holes, initially we found that those readings were accurate, but as staff continued to do additional holes, we found that that was not a consistent 6 to 8 inches, but rather had more of 2 to 6 inches varying throughout the site. This is not enough to be able to reuse for the grading of the site. So we had Kumar come out and take a look at it. And their recommendation is that we over excavate about 18 inches and then use a geogrid to provide a more stable subbase. So the change order includes a stamp grading plan, excavation 18 inches, geogrid throughout the site, and a clean, consistent class 6 to begin proof rolls. A couple of issues with this, though, that we want to bring before council. Some of our concerns with this are that the soils are bad all the way. And so even if we do an over excavation, we still have more than 15 feet of poor soils with saturation. And we know from experience of other facilities in that area that where, like the MOC, where we over excavated 5 feet and still had settlement issues because of the poor soils underneath that. Also, the change order is a significant increase to the project. It's about 43% increase to the cost of the project. And there's some concern about what impact it's going to have to the area with having 120 trucks coming in and out when we know the conditions of the soil around there. So a proposal that staff has is to look at an alternative solution that's being utilized by Matt and his team over at the new electric building, which is to utilize what's called a cap micropile grid. Allows us to go down to bedrock in small shafts. So in layman's terms, if you want to think of a bed of nails with a plyboard on top of that, that provides a nice stable foundation rather than putting a plywood board on top of a mattress, which still has some shift. This type of design would be much more stable and potentially much more cost effective. Matt Langhorst was very nice in helping us get some contractor estimates. On a very conservative range, we're looking at below 200,000 to maybe 250,000 or so. So even in worst case scenario, if this is feasible and we have a contractor that has availability to do this, it would allow us to have some cost savings as well as provide a better subbase for the tennis court, so we don't have failure there. So what we would like for council to do is go ahead and move forward with the amount not to exceed in the change order, and staff will continue to look at the feasibility and scheduling availability of utilizing contractor to install the micro piles. So the project can remain on its current schedule We are asking for a not to exceed amount, and then we'll continue to work to try and bring that amount down.
Questions? Marco?
Brian, thank you. Just a quick question. It seems crazy, but the micro piles are less expensive than the over excavation. Do you know how deep the piles have to be?
They go all the way down to bedrock, which
50
is
feet,
about
40 feet?
25 feet.
About
I think,
25
is what-
feet. Okay. Oh, okay. And then with the concrete egg crate grid on drop and everything is around 250,000?
Yeah, yes, for the installation of micro piles. yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Matt, you getting out of that chair is like getting out of a clown car.
So we're doing the exact same thing at the EOC. It's basically the same depth. These piles would go to 30 or 35 feet. Bedrock's at about 25. So you want to go into that, get the grout in there, give yourself a good base for it. I was looking at the cost of the piles. We did 215 of them at the EOC, and it was around $1,000 a pile. So even if there's 100 of them on this thing, which is conservative, they're around $1,000. It's $100,000. This is a $267,000 change order that we're looking at. Then you got a pile cap on top of that, which basically is concrete. It's a little footer basically with some rebar in it, some over excavation to get that in, those kinds of things. So if they're comparable in price, why wouldn't you go with the bomb-proof option if it's really available? So preliminarily, they look like they're fairly comparable, maybe even some cost savings with the micro piles. So why not take a next step in a couple of weeks and just get a little design for that thing, make sure it is really realistic, send it out to the contractors, do some pricing, potentially even change the slab that they currently have designed for the tennis courts, maybe make that a little simpler also. So it seems like it's a good place to kind of stop. And all this work can be done over the winter time. Micro piles can be drilled at any time of the year. A couple concrete blankets, you can pour concrete. So it's not like you would slow the project down, but it might make it better in the end, depending on how it all flushes out.
I'm just curious about the construction because that's how my mind works. So the piles come up, you get the plate, and then the tennis court floor is poured over those plates, or do you pour a footer first on each pile and then connect it with rebar and all that, and then pour the
SGM did real quick kind of analysis for us, but it would be like an 18 by 18 inch footer.
Okay.
And the piles come up, there's a plate, there's
Right.
rebar and all of it. It basically creates a beam from post to post to post to post. The piles being the post, just like.
And then
this
you
building
fill in
here.
for the floor.
And
Then
you fill in,
for the
and
court.
then all of a sudden you've got a nice flat area sitting on concrete. You pour
Right.
something on top of it. And it could be a floating slab, it may be a structural slab. It's kind of TBD at this moment, but it seems reasonable to at least stop it.
And that was my next question. Could you add structure to that if you had to? If we ever want to enclose the courts with a tent or something, you could add weight to those piles because they're designed for more weight than the courts itself.
That would be a conversation to
Possibly.
have
Okay.
with the engineer, yeah.
Fair enough.
Because right now, all you're talking about is snow and concrete you're trying to carry. If you add on top of that, all of a sudden you have structure itself, which has weights to it. So it would be a consideration to at least have a discussion about with.
Okay, thank you.
Paula?
Steve, where's the money come from?
We'd probably use parkland fees in the capital projects fund.
Charlie?
I had one question. In is there any like proposed, it'll last X number of years versus like anything, like.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so the reason we went with the post-tension concrete is because it will last the lifetime of the community center. And like Matt said, with this setup, it'd be bomb-proof, so.
Great. That's what I wanted to hear when I see $267,000.
And right, for tennis courts, right? I guess I do like the idea of spending that on more bomb-proof structure than just hauling away material. But I'm wondering about the water in the soils there. Are we gonna have a drain system around this? And how do we keep the soils from staying wetted, since that's the problem over there with getting
Yeah,
the soils wet?
that's another
Yeah.
project, is to evaluate that. We know that most of the drains around that north side of the building have failed.
Okay.
And we do have, as we see through this excavation, a lot of water retention. When we had some of those rain events, we were not seeing that water dissipate at the rate we were expecting. So that's that whole area really needs to be evaluated and
Some kind of like French drains or something. Matt, I guess this question's for Matt too. Instead of piles, did we look at a float, like a structural floating foundation raft type system or anything?
Well, basically, that's what a post-tension slab is a raft. So the design they currently have is concrete
that,
with post-tension cable, so it basically smashes it all together and it can float over. I think preliminary estimates for SDM are like a 15-foot span. That's how we came up with the pile cap design. They're about 15 feet apart, so that slab could float from cap to cap to cap, even if the soil below it completely failed.
okay,
Kind of thing. So that's the reason for post-tension slabs. They do them all over. They do them at Iron Bridge. They do them all over the valley. They work really well to float, but at some point, how much float is okay?
right, especially if it's getting wet. That's,
Well, especially if you have other solid entities around it, like the sidewalks, the building, if you're attaching things to it, how much do you want that slab to move and affect the things around it? And there's potential for good frost heave on these things because of so much water in there. You know, it's kind of I like structure.
yes,
When we build buildings now, we will build them correctly. And this seems like a building to me. It's got to be flat. It's got to be nice and crack free.
okay.
If we can make it the same cost to build as a building, basically, why not?
But we don't have a plan in here right now to do like French drain or anything.
that is not
It's not part of this.
Other questions?
One more. So will you be coming back to us when we have some solid costs on this? I mean, you say not to exceed 267, but how do we find out where we ended up on it?
We certainly report back. I think we're just trying to, with the not to exceed, it gives us some flexibility to explore options under that and keep the project moving as, you know, the mornings are starting to feel a little bit like fall might be here. And so I think trying to stay on track is critical, but we'll report back out as to what the final solution and costs were.
So we're approving a change order for $267,165. That's in addition to the $500,000 that's already budgeted.
That's correct.
Right.
Okay.
And that is really just a kind of increasing the budget amount with this change order, but not specifying what the method is.
Sure.
The other option to this is that we don't do it. We'll have a court system similar to what we originally put in. That'll last about 5 years as opposed to 20 plus with this system.
Can I ask one more question? Do we have any other place where we could go out and build tennis courts on stable soils, like out in South Glenwood?
This is Glenwood
Where
Springs.
we're on
We're
gravel?
alluvian fan
No, we have
central,
areas
right? So
Uptown that are river cobbled.
Yeah.
Airport area. Yeah. Okay, just wondering what it would cost to put tennis courts out there with just a few layers.
can always use more courts.
I would move to approve change order number 1 and amount not to exceed 267,165 and allow staff discretion on how to proceed.
I'll second that.
Moved by Charlie, seconded by Ingrid. Ryan, let's call the question.
Yes, Counselor Wusso. Yes, Counselor Stepp. Yes, Counselor Dem. Yes, Mayor Pro Tem Willman. Yes, Mayor Godis. Yes, Counselor Hershey. No, Counselor Kaup. 6-1.
Thanks, Ryan. Thank you, Brian.
Council. We'll go ahead and jump into the next item.
Perfect.
So council asked us to go to the Parks and Recreation Commission and the Financial Advisory Board to get recommendations to bring back to council in regards to the Sopris View trail system and trail easement. Staff has done that. We have a recommendation from the Parks and Recreation Commission that supports moving forward with a trail easement. They asked the question of whether we could do a if council would like to open up the area for the city to take financial responsibility and maintenance responsibility for it, can we put in an easement agreement without actually building a trail system? A trail easement without a trail, or like a conservation easement, something like that. But also but they were very supportive of moving forward with the project. We didn't really get much as far as direction for design, other than to try and work with a trail designer. This would not be able to be mountain bike trails because of the topography of the area. It would be most likely a hiking trail. We don't necessarily we have base preliminary costs of what a trail system typically would be. But until we get in and look at how to handle some of the challenges with the topography and the washes, we won't have an accurate number to give an estimate, and we haven't figured out what that loop looks like, or how much council like budget on it. Financial Advisory Board passed two motions. One was a recommendation to raise trail maintenance throughout system wide from 50,000, which is currently what the budget and funding for that has been, to 200,000. That was mostly around a discussion of encampment cleanup around open spaces and trail systems. They also passed a recommendation to council to postpone building any trails in the Sopers View area at this time. I think that those comments mostly came from a desire to understand from council a little better of what the vision for the future of that area is and what council is trying to achieve here, whether it's do we want trails, and is this the best place for a trail, or are we looking at encampment cleanup? And if that's the larger discussion, is this where we want to focus, or how do you want to encapsulate that effort trail wide? And I think that's where that first motion ended up with. So council asked for recommendations. In most case, the commission's kind of kicked it back to council, saying, give us some parameters on how you want us to give recommendations for. I think we do have some commissioners here, but I'd probably just leave for public comment. Anything else, Carl or Steve, you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think that, Councilor Kaup and I have had a couple of conversations. She's been the lead on this on the council side. So I think when we get to that point, she's got some thoughts on a motion to keep this focused and moving forward. I do think that we have, we've had these little pieces going on and sort of never had complete clear direction from council as to moving forward or not. I also know that Commissioner Jankowski is here, and I think he's got some comments to make about this as well. I might suggest that you, since he's a potential partner, give him some space up here now and not in public comment.
Yeah, I'd love to open it for public comment for whoever wants to comment. But certainly, are you done?
Yeah, staff defers to council. Really, we will do the pleasure of council. We're just looking for a little more direction on if you want us to go after an RFP, if you want us to partner, we need some parameters around whether or not we want to annex in that parcel. It's within fire jurisdiction, but not PD jurisdiction. We'd have to work with the county. It's on private property, not public. There's pros and cons of both. We've talked about this before. And so we just need a little direction on what you would like to see for an agreement. If you want us to go forward, we'll go as directed.
Thanks, Brian. Public comment?
All you guys be on the other side of the dial. A year ago, we, in partnership with the city, we cleaned up that area, and it was 60,000 pounds of trash, 20-yard dumpsters. I think there were 35 to 40.
Can you say your name? I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. Tom Jankowski. I am here as a Garfield County Commissioner, but I am one commissioner. And I live at
99 West Bank Road in Glenwood Springs, West Bank, actually. Not the city of Glenwood Springs.
It's your address. We got it.
Got it. Okay. So anyway, we worked a year ago. We worked together and we took out, 60,000 pounds of trash, 20-yard dumpsters worth. We took out between 35 to 40 propane cylinders, the big ones, or the 5-gallon propane cylinders. We took out 200 to 300 small propane cylinders, took out 2 5-gallon buckets of hypodermic needles. So, it was done under a health issue. And so I'm kind of here to talk also about the fire issue, which is a safety issue. We've had 4 forest fires there, not forest fires, but wildland fires. And Glenwood PD's done a really good job of putting those out. However, we can't continue to have wildfires up there because one of them is going to get away and it has potential to come into the city. The land is in unincorporated Garfield County, just right on the other side, the east side of the Glenwood ditch. You guys all know about the Bell Rippey development, and there's a lot more activity there than there's been before. And I think there's probably fewer people camping there, but I believe there's still 2 campsites up there. Sheriff Valerio went had some of his team go in June and try to move people out, but didn't get everybody out of there. Issued some trespassing citations and so forth. So, I've been talking with Shelley, and we've been talking with Aspen Valley Land Trust, and been talking with Bell Rippey, just kind of how can we put this together, and also the landowner. And Shelley just talked with the landowner who's been an absent. That's been part of the problem. He's been an absentee landowner. Shelley and I went to a year ago. We went to Beaver Creek and met with him, and he gave us the authority to post no trespassing signs. And he says he wants trespassers kept off there and so forth. But there still are some trespassers up there. Our thought is, this landowner would like to transfer the land for a tax benefits. He would like to transfer it to either the city or the county or Aspen Valley Land Trust. That's where he could get a tax write-off for the donating the land. And he would also like to have us mention his name in a positive manner instead of a negative manner. It's one of the things he said. So with that, I think we do need to transfer this land, whether it be the city or the county. We've been trying to work with AVLT, and they're more bureaucratic than we are, believe it or not. Or it seems like it from my perspective. Let's put it that way. They probably are just maybe aren't as interested in this land as we are. So one of the thoughts, and this was brought forward, is, well, maybe if we get a lot of activity on that land, and then we're going to have a lot more people living there. If we get a lot of activity on that land and we have trails going through campsites, maybe it just is not as conducive to people camping there. And I think one of the concerns Carl brought up, and also our county attorney, is if the land is held by a municipality or by a county, then people can camp there, and there's some legal issues there. So we thought, maybe this can be transferred back to Bell Rippey. And I've had a conversation. It's been at least a month now. They're open to that, but they don't want the liability. They don't want to see their taxes increase. I think there were some other things, and they would like to see a trail that is maintained, and it is not their responsibility to maintain it. So those are kind of some of where we're at, and I really appreciate Councilor Kopp working with us on this, is because it's something that needs to be fixed. It just needs to be fixed. And one of the things that I've said is, Garfield County each year gets $200,000 GoCo dollars, and we use those on for primarily for trails, but for trails and recreation. And some examples are the Red Hill, with some of those dollars went into Red Hill for that trail. Some of them through the Hardwick Bridge Trail, which is gets kids from Iron Bridge, West Bank to the new school, the Riverview School, and then also some of the dollars have gone to the city for trails in South Canyon for mountain bike trails, and they've gone to Newcastle for the trail from Newcastle out to Apple Tree Park. So this is something we can do, and the city could come in front of Garfield County. Those funds have not been allocated for 23, and I think there's about $200,000 could be used there for trails. But you know, again, it has to work into the city's plan if you're open to that. If not, something needs to happen, and it needs to happen within a year. And so if that's not the case, then we just need to make sure the land transfer goes through.
So if it's okay, I just want to ask a few questions. I mean, I personally think just keeping it in private hands so that we can have that enforcement potential. Someone else can have that enforcement potential, and we don't have the right to rest kind of issues that we experience in other parts is really key. That's a comment. But my question is, do we know, at least in your guys' conversation with Triumph, is Triumph the owners or 4 Points?
Proposed owner, excuse me. Tom, when you say that they would like a trail, is that trail a bottom line condition to them taking ownership of it? Have we determined that yet? Or is that just something they would like?
I don't have the answer.
Okay.
I don't have the answer to that. You know?
Yeah, if I may, when we worked through, I think I circulated one of the former packets, kind of the deal points as they were laid out by the various parties. The two things that they were really focused on is they wanted to know that the trail was going to happen, and that they wanted some understanding or level of commitment to enforcement, which is always tough with our stretched agencies. But I do think they're not looking to just take title and then, you know, have it be 10 or 15 years till a trail shows up, because they're looking for that activation as well.
Thanks. Sorry, go ahead. I'm sorry. All right. If you don't mind, if we have some questions for you.
No, it'd be great.
Go ahead, Ingrid.
What would be the time frame? Does anybody have any idea of what that looks like? And your GoCo funds, they're 2022 funds?
2023 funds. So you would
2023 funds.
Come in
Okay.
January in front of the Board of County Commissioners. The city would request the use of those funds.
Okay.
But right now, those funds are not encumbered.
Okay.
And so that I would say there's a high possibility.
Okay,
that
okay,
would be,
yeah.
Approved, so.
And if I can speak to that a little bit, the current owner would very much like the land transfer to take place before the end of this year for tax purposes. If we can make that happen, AVLT has stated that the way they would see that is they would get everything in place, and the land transfer would kind of go through them, but it would all happen simultaneously as a real estate type deal. And it would end up in, you know, the ownership of whoever the final owner is to be, preferably 4 Points, I think is where we've been. So if we can get to that, then, you know, we'd have agreements on when we would get trails built. I don't see trails being built. I mean, if we have to go through design and looking for partners and funding partners, and the county hopefully will be a strong partner in that trail building, then that would take a little bit of time. I would think at least 2023 into 2024 by the time we get that constructed. That's just what.
Yeah, it's 140 acres, so it's not mountain bike trails by any means.
Right,
It's hike-
right.
hiking trails, and I really see it really being something for the south end of the city, southeastern side of the city, really.
Right,
So.
right.
So I just have a question just on responsibility. You know, if we come before, the city comes before the county as an applicant for some portion of the 200,000 to build the trails. You know, I know probably what our process is we would put out an RFP for design, and then we put out an RFP for, based on that and that cost, we put out an RFP for trail building. our Parks and Rec department wouldn't actually do any of this other than maybe put out an RFP. Is there a reason why the county can't just take the money they get anyway? Excuse me, we're all part of the county. Is there a reason you couldn't just do that without us being the middleman? I'm having a hard time understanding why we need to have a role in that.
Yeah, and that's a good question. The best answer is the county doesn't have a parks and recreation or trails department. You know, we could potentially get the trails built, you know, by just going through the county and using those funds to build the trails. However, when it comes to maintenance, and it comes to somebody to go out, and really you need to have a ranger go beyond those trails and make sure that people aren't camping up there. I think that's an important issue. From my perspective, it's more important for me that we don't have any more fires up there. And that's really where I'm coming from. I think it's poor governance on my part as a commissioner if we continue to let people camp there, and there's potential for wildland fire coming into Glenwood Springs. That's where I'm coming from. So this has been put out as an opportunity or been proposed as an opportunity to maybe have activity up there and make it less desirable for camping. And I do think having those apartments there is going to make it less desirable for camping. I think the campers that are up there have moved up the hill, and but there's some people that are really entrenched in there, and we need to see that change. So if I had a different way, just say, hey, you know, this land's going to be transferred, and they're not going to be any more campers up there, and we're not going to have the chance of a forest fire, then I would be more than happy with that. But we do have these funds available. And we kind of need to work together to figure out how to take care of this issue, because it's an important issue. Wildfire is an important issue in our area.
Tom, I know that the county has, as you said earlier, worked with Red Mountain out of Carbondale and the trail system in Newcastle. I think you also helped out in Rifle with their trail system. But those systems are outside of town limits, is that correct? And is that arrangement with them because their towns also use their parks and trails department to kind of run those? I'm just trying to understand how each town works with the county on that.
Each town approached us, and they had, you know, Carbondale had issues with the parking, County Road 107, straightening that out. And I think they did annex over there finally to the parking, but originally that was an unincorporated Garfield County.
Okay.
Definitely the trail in Newcastle is an unincorporated Garfield County, goes outside Newcastle city limits, but the town of Newcastle was they built the trail. And then it was RE1 was the lead on the trail for the Hardwood Bridge.
Right. Okay.
Charlie?
First of all, Tom, I want to thank you. You know, I think trying to make the city and the county find ways to cooperate and doing things is great. I appreciate the opportunity to work with the county in this. My question for you is, you know, I have a concern. You said that there's 200,000, and looking at the estimated cost of per foot or mile that Ryan has given us, then the cost could exceed the 200,000. That's one. And you said something about a park ranger, and we
Right.
talked earlier today about positions and whether we can add positions, and I think a park ranger would be excellent, but if we have the money to do that, do you see any possibility there would be ongoing willingness of the county commissioners to continue to help us fund this particular area, both in maintenance and maybe some of the cost to have the park ranger? And I know it's hard. Nobody can commit future budgets. I understand that.
That's kind of where we get to the point that we don't have the department to do that, or the funding mechanism. I mean, that would have to become something that was funded every year, and mean, the $200,000 is there, but it's there more for infrastructure for building something than. So
Yeah, and I appreciate
I
that.
don't have I don't
No, no,
have
I-
a good answer for you on that.
No, I'm not, I know you only one commissioner. I appreciate that. That's, I guess, my concern is I love the idea of us figuring out a way to make this work, and particularly in cooperation with the county. I'm having trouble with how do I, as a council member, basically work, once we do it, then we're committed to spending money every year to do it, whether we allocate it or not. I mean, it's always subject to budget every year, but that's my concern, is the ongoing cost. So.
Any more questions?
Yeah, I had one more. And that is that when you say we could come back every year and make the request, it's similar to the other grants that you guys offer. So whatever, maybe there could be an organization that represents a volunteer group or something, they could come to you and request funds to support that. Isn't that how?
You know, I don't know if Roaring Fork volunteers, if they,
Okay.
you know, they do that type, they build trails.
Yeah.
I don't know if they,
Maintain,
they've
yeah.
they've kind of changed a little bit with the new director.
Okay.
I think it's Adam, right?
Yeah.
The new director. They've changed somewhat,
Okay.
but, you know, Roaring Fork Volunteers is one that comes to mind. So.
Okay, yeah.
And, you know, those funds are, they're used. I mean, the other municipalities come in and they request those funds. And that's usually where they go, is to municipalities.
Mhm. Okay. Thank
Other
you.
people from the public had to comment. Thanks, Tom.
Well, speaking of Roaring Fork Outdoor Volunteers, my name is Melissa. I'm the program director at Roaring Fork Outdoor Volunteers.
Melissa who?
Melissa Daniels.
Thank you.
So if you're not familiar with RFOV, we engage the community in land stewardship through trail work, ecological restoration, and fire mitigation. So collectively between our staff, we have many, many years of experience in trail work, so trail building and trail maintenance. So we were asked a few months ago to go look at the property and give our thoughts on the trails there, both the building and the maintenance, and our potential involvement in the future. So our staff went out in the spring, and our general consensus is that that terrain is quite steep and the soil is quite loose. And so it's not really the type of terrain that is appropriate for our staff to design or build a trail, or for volunteers to really be a major part in that sort of trail building. So we think it's really a good fit for like a professional trail contractor to come in and do that design. With that said, we do in other areas work with trail contractors who then find small ways to plug volunteers in. So that's not to say that you can't have volunteers at all. It's just not the kind of place that is appropriate for a majority volunteer project. And then once those trails are built, we are happy to be involved in any sort of maintenance ongoing into the future, similarly to the way we're involved in other trails in the city of Glenwood. And I know that there's that trail that's in the flatter area along that ditch line there. So, you know, that sort of trail that's much less technical than the super steep areas. Those are the kinds of things we're happy to be more involved in.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Oh, thanks.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, I will bring it back for comments or motion.
I appreciate all the comments tonight and discussion, and I have talked to Carl a little bit about this, and I guess, you know, we have been talking about this since last October, and every time it comes before council, we kind of say, yeah, let's move it forward. Let's test the waters and see where we go, but we haven't been able to really definitively get it over the finish line. So I feel like after that much time, we've had a lot of discussion. We've got a lot of input on it, and I think it's time to move it forward. I would say from the FAB recommendation, you know, they seem to have a question of what are our goals here? And I think when I listen to everyone about what our goals are, basically what the city and the county have talked about, and all the other partners, is to seek to collaborate with interested parties to preserve that Cypress View property for open space and for recreation, And then also acknowledging that by activating that land, we are seeking to create trails for recreation in that whole southeast portion of town of the city and reduce the environmental and the fire risks and costs on the property. So I think that's a clear goal of what we want to achieve here. Again, it appears that we have many willing partners. We have the owner of the property willing to donate. We have a new owner, 4 Points, who have expressed, they have some reservations, but they've expressed interest in ownership. I think that's the preference of the county and the city, is to keep it in private ownership if we can. But I don't know that we need to solve that tonight. We also have AVLT, Roaring Fork Outdoor Volunteers, the city police and Garfield County Sheriff, just both saying they're willing to do enforcement, even though they know that it's challenging in that area. And we've got the neighborhood who's interested in it. So we all recognize that it's a good opportunity. So I would like to make a motion tonight that we're not trying to solve it tonight, but I would like to make a motion that we direct staff to secure a rough and reasonable cost estimate for the hiking trail construction. And, just a rough estimate, not necessarily going to full RFP, but hiking trail construction, and then also an idea of what the maintenance might be, potential funding options, and that we also ask legal to complete the draft MOU between all the interested parties, including Mr. Forenza, 4 Points and Triumph, AVLT, Garfield County, and the city, and have that brought back to council for approval within the next 35 days, which would put it no later than our October 7th council meeting, which would still hopefully leave the opportunity for AVLT and all the parties to get this transfer done before the end of the year. That's my motion.
And I'll second that motion.
Been moved and seconded. Yes, it has. Other comments? Been moved by Shelley, seconded by Ingrid, excuse me. Other comments, Paula?
You go first.
I've also been part of these conversations, and I feel like it's much longer than October. Feels like it's gone on for a couple of years, but really, Shelley, you and Tom, and others, Laura, have put a lot of effort into it, specifically in the last year. And so I do support this moving forward. And there's a couple of things that I just want to address. Charlie and I and Jonathan were at the recent FAB meeting when we had this discussion. And the question of what are our overarching goals, or what is the big picture, what are we looking for, came forward. And it's easy to say, give me the one thing, but it's more than one thing. And so I want to agree with Shelley that our goals are not only to increase our open space and trails, which was part of our RERC that we all were involved in here at the city 3 or 4 years ago, that we had funding from at the federal level. We want more trails in this area, but also what the implications of activating this would mean, which is the mitigation to trash and encampments and possible fire, that activity would help up on those trails. I do want to say, I also believe that we have to really consider what is the cost of not doing anything. And the cost continues year to year if we don't do anything. So there is a cost involved there. And the other part is, if we activate this area and we're able to work along with others and collaborate, and I'm going to extend that collaboration to the Roaring Fork Marketplace, the Walmart area, they will see, and by them being collaborators, they will see increased activity and shopping in that area, which will then benefit the city of Glenwood, which will increase our taxes. So we have to really look at that, as well as having this activity on the southeast end of town is going to make a difference for us financially. And we need to really take that into account when we do consider cost. The risk of what happens if we don't, the cost of what happens if we don't do anything, and what do we gain financially by activating this area.
This evening I heard participation from so many different players who historically we've said we think they may. But this evening I heard, yes, partnerships exist. I also did not hear that we're making some huge financial commitment either. Rather, we're taking a step towards better understanding the costs involved here. But we also, we're creating alliances with Garfield County, with, RFOV, with groups that I feel like have a history of success with projects similar to this. I cannot stress what Paula said enough. By not doing something, we're actually incurring additional costs. And so, moving this forward is a step in the absolute right direction, in my opinion.
Charlie?
Brian, is it reasonable to ask you to, given our discussions earlier today?
Charlie, can you speak up just a little bit? Sorry.
Oh, I thought it was loud. Is it reasonable to ask you to get this turned around and give us these rough numbers in 35 days? Is that reasonable to do?
Yeah, I think we can give you the information you want. I think my only comment with this, and I appreciate all your comments, we definitely need partners for this. Because I would just ask you to glance at your temporary tattoos on your hand or forehead as you consider this. And I'm sorry, that's an inside joke for the public. Basically, what I'm saying is, consider the impact to staffing and an already stretched budget. So we will need assistance. We can't just put this on the shoulders of parks and expect a change in the issues we're having there.
Marco? No. I was gonna comment to follow up my question. I'm gonna support the motion because I agree with you, Ingrid, we're not committing any funds. I may not ultimately vote to do this, even though I think overall it's a great idea. My concern is, do we have the money to, this is an ongoing cost, and that's what I asked Commissioner Jankowski, and I think that's the issue I still have. How do we pay for this on an ongoing basis? Is this a good place to spend our money? Is there other places that other park needs and things that maybe we had to be spending our money on, but I don't think we can make that decision without knowing those costs.
Marco?
Thank you. And just to clarify, and Shelley, I think I'll probably ask you, the motion really only, it doesn't commit us to anything. It only gives us information on how much it's going to cost and how much maintenance would be.
Well, and I think the biggest piece to me is that we are asking legal to go ahead. Carl had brought us a draft MOU, which really pulls all the partners together and what their, agreements are. And it's to get that together and finalize, work out these details that we don't need to work out up here on the dais. Who's responsible for what? And that's really the thing. To me, it's the most important piece here.
But just because we get that document doesn't mean we're going to commit
We're not
to any
approving
money.
it right now.
Anything. We're just going to see it and then we're going to decide whether we want to do it
We
or
will
not.
decide to do it, but
Right.
it's the onus is on all partners to come together and
Okay.
put together a working piece.
And that said, I'm gonna echo Charlie, and I'm gonna say I would love to see a trail. There's absolutely no doubt. But I don't want to pay for it. I need the partners to pay for the trail. We will hire somebody to put it in, since we have a Parks and Rec department, and we will probably come up for some of the maintenance. That's kind of where I'm at
So
this
for
point.
the-
For the maintenance, we will be, yes, responsible to a certain degree, but to pay for the trail, I'm with Councilor Willman. We need partners to pay for this.
And I want to jump
Yeah.
in and say that.
Hold on one second.
Oh,
So that's where I'm at.
oh,
No, Tony, it's.
Point of order.
Oh, yeah, I get it. I'm with you. Go.
Oh, I get it on?
If-
But it seems like this is one of those zombie issues, Shelley, that just keeps coming back. This community has so many problems and so many issues that are not being addressed. I'm not interested in spending any money on this, and I'm going to oppose it. Thank you.
I'll give my comments and then, an additional one last before we take the vote. I just want to challenge some of the comments that have been made tonight. I think that activation does not mean that we don't have homeless encampments. If that was the case, Brian, how many homeless encampments do we have in the Wilson Trail? How many miles of trail do we have at Wilson?
Wilson, probably about.
It's okay.
yeah.
It's okay.
Yeah.
It's
Probably
it's-
about 48. something
Yeah.
like that.
So significantly more than this would be. And how many homeless encampments do we estimate are in Wilson?
I'd say in the teens.
So I want to challenge us when we say that activation is going to stop wildfire, because it has not. We have anywhere from whatever this is being proposed. I've heard 1.8 miles and somewhere between 4 and 8 miles. So we have 2 to 5 times as many miles of trails at Wilson. We have, I was going to say, boy, we should probably just wait to see once Bell Rippey is occupied to see how just the occupation of that 100 units impacts it. I think that'll make a difference because that's in really close proximity to where these homeless encampments are. But at the same time, the proximity for the lofts and Glenwood Greens has not really made that much of a difference at Wilson. So I really don't believe, and I think it's been proven out at Wilson, at places where there are trails, actually trails lead to homeless encampments at the Dock Holiday Trail, but in other places where we have trails, I wouldn't say it's a magnet, but that is where our homeless encampments are. And so I don't think that a trail does that. If we're trying to solve wildfire, if that's the big issue, I just had a presentation this past week. Chief of County did a 1/4 cent sales tax, where as a county, they did a wildland urban interface thinning and wildfire mitigation completely. It's a 10-year plan, $30 million to do wildland mitigation around those 2, actually 3 communities, Monte Vista. What's the 3rd community, Chief? Something like that. But mostly it's Buena Vista and Salida. If we're talking about that, we did in my backyard, literally 3 Mile Creek, about 5 years ago, Steve, we did a $20,000-$30,000 wildfire mitigation to really thin out the fuels in there. We don't have to build a trail to make wildfire a lot less likely. We can do a wildland fire mitigation on that property if that's what we're worried about. So I think we're putting a trail here because we want activation, because we don't want a homeless encampment, but that's not proven to be effective anywhere else in the city. We want to mitigate fire, but there are other ways to mitigate it without a trail. I think that, this is still land in the county and it's private land currently. I don't know what tools there are to enforce this with the current landowner. If the county has the ability, or the sheriff has the ability to cite that owner, so there's a stick. He wants the carrot of these tax giveaway and tax benefits, but there is a stick of current enforcement that I don't think is being utilized potentially to the full extent. I think that if we want a trail system, if we want to spend X amount of dollars, or the county does, is this the best place? Is it to expand it in a place where we don't have parking or trailhead or bathrooms available like we do at Wilson? Parking's a huge issue at Red Mountain. Have we talked to Walmart? Have we talked to the Roaring Fork Marketplace about parking? Has that piece come along? Because if it doesn't, then we have no way for people to come to that area to use that trail, because we don't know if Walmart's going to start ticketing people for using a trail in their area. So I think these are all questions, but I think my biggest concern, the reason I'm not going to support this motion, is the first thing is, having Carl and the city spend our time and resources to draft an MOU. I think the county has attorneys, they can draft the MOU. They can be the driver in this. They can build the trail. They don't need a parks department to build a trail any more than we will, because Brian's not going to be out there with a pickaxe. We're going to contract it out. So I think, my suggestion would be that the county's attorney work on a county trail, to build a county trail on county land and jurisdiction, bring it to us to review. The county, if they want to build it, can build it. And then I think we want to make sure we have a cost sharing agreement. And I think that's as long as the county is willing to go 50-50 to maintain a trail, I think it benefits both the county and benefits both the city in an equal way. But I just kind of feel like we're driving this whole thing for a property that is not located in the city. And I don't know where else we do that anywhere else around. So that's why I think I just don't know how all this responsibility got shifted. I think we should have some responsibility. I absolutely do. And it should be a partner. But I don't know why we are the ones driving it all when everything we've talked about tonight, outside the one thing of maintaining it, the county's able to do. So that's probably why I won't be supporting the motion as it's done tonight. I don't mind getting an estimate, but again, we're using our staff time to get an estimate on what it would take for something that is on county property.
I have a comment.
Okay, well, hold a second. I said we're gonna take one more comment before we call the question. So if we want to open it up for everybody to do a second round, that's fine.
Great,
But
let's do.
No, let's not.
Yeah.
Ingrid, go ahead.
All right, so my first thing is.
Ingrid had
I,
the.
no, I actually, I yielded to.
Okay.
She yielded. We do other projects. We do Southbridge. We put a lot of money into it. We're investing in the future of Glenwood Springs. This is an investment in the future of Glenwood Springs in partnership with the county. So I think that we need to consider that. We have talked to Walmart and Mooring Park Marketplace in the last year, 2 years of discussion. And there has been comments that they would embrace this possibility of providing parking in that area. The county and many other stakeholders are involved in a Roaring Fork pre-mitigation project with fire that I've attended meetings for the last 6 months, every month, on how do we take care of the wildland urban interface. So I think that there's already money and effort being put into that. And that does also take time and money. And our fire district, Gary Tillotson, is one of the representatives from the city of Glenwood. So I think some of the things that you're addressing, we are addressing, but this is a bigger thing. This is not just, hey, are we mitigating fire and are we taking care of the encampments? As I said earlier, I think it's very important that we look at what we want to be as a community. And one of the things that we have told ourselves in our strategic planning is we want open space and trails. And this is an opportunity to do that. It is outside of city limits, but it does enhance the city and makes a difference for our tourist population. It makes a difference for our local population. It makes a difference for that community right there that is surrounding that trail area. So I have to differ a little bit with some of the points that you made. I think this is an opportunity for us and I think we should embrace it.
So that's right.
All I was gonna say, I think Paula framed that really well, and that is that I hear where a few of the counselors are with this, but those who are more on the fence, I would ask you not to be a hard no on funding trails at all. Because the reality is we do have a line item for trails. We even had a recommendation to increase that. So while it may be that you don't want to fund the entirety of it, be receptive and open to funding a portion of it if this is the direction that it goes.
I'm happy to fund trails in the city, Ingrid.
Sure.
Thank you.
You're welcome, not in the county.
Well, I would agree with Paula though, and Ingrid, that there's a reason that we are pursuing this, and it's because Garfield County stretches all the way to the Colorado-Utah border. It's a huge expanse, and this property is a trail opportunity that will serve primarily city residents in that southern area. It's right on our doorstep. It's technically not in the city, but it's certainly within our boundary of planning and urban planning, and it's right next to the city. So it makes sense that we will maintain the trails. We have a Parks and Rec department. The county does not, but I appreciate their offer to help us get it built. Maybe we can go after grant funding if it costs more than what's available from the county. But I also appreciate Brian's sentiments coming from Parks and Rec that yes, we may need more money for trail maintenance, but it's not just because of this project. It's all of the trails that we maintain around the city. And it's all of those, I have a hard time mixing cleaning up homeless encampments just with trail maintenance, because those are two different things. And those encampments are an ongoing project or, issue all the way around the city, not just where we have trails and things like that. So I will support this.
Well, I would say,
Mr. Mayor, can I call a question? I think we've all made our position.
well, everybody else got a second crack. I'm going to take a second crack. And I think that if, the thing I want us to remember is that yes, we have a Parks and Rec department. We have a Parks and Rec department that cannot maintain our current parks. We are down half a dozen employees in our current Parks and Rec department. So regardless of us having one on paper, we don't have one practically. So that's my last question, Ryan, or comment. Ryan's called a question. No, that would be another comment. Comments ended.
Forgot which way I was voting. How many unanimous votes have there been tonight?
There have been none.
Is that about none? or
Yes,
quasi-
Mayor Pro
quasi
Tem
none?
Willman, yes, Counselor Russo, no, Mayor
Can you
Godus,
respect
yes, Counselor Dem, yes, Counselor Step, yes, Counselor Kaup, no, Counselor Hershey. It passes 5-2.
Thank you, council. We'll see you in a month.
Thank you.
Don't waste too much time.
All right. That was it. Do we have anything? City manager, Steve. Oh, I'm sorry. Council comments. I apologize. Do we have council comments? Anybody? Go ahead.
I have one, and that is that we talk about it, we bring it up occasionally, but we have yet to be really proactive and make a work session about it. And that is that I want to see some water-wise incentives, and I want to get it I want to get it structured, I want to get it set up, and I want to get it implemented. So I don't know if we can put it on a future agenda.
Here.
Okay.
I really care about water. Why are we building so much more housing?
So I think a great thing, if I may,
Uh-huh.
I'm totally supportive of that. I really would hope that we can wait till we get a new city manager, hopefully before, because again, this water program is a lot of work for
Mhm.
Parks and Rec. Like it's
Yeah.
going to be a big project. So
Yeah, actually, I think it's more work in some ways for Public Works than
Yeah,
it is
yeah.
for Parks and Rec. But maybe what we do is we just say January work session.
yeah, that's great.
Okay.
That's great.
And
That's
let
how
me
I'd like
add
to-
that the River Commission and Parks and Rec have both been looking at these
Okay.
and looking for programs that we could do. So we
Great.
should invite them to that. work session.
Absolutely.
You know, Paula, do you think there might be enough of an interest on both those commissions? They'd want to have a joint meeting
Yeah.
about this?
I think this would be a good one to do it on.
Is that, Steve, something you could help arrange between those two staff liaisons that we can get a joint?
Mhm.
Do you think that'd be good to have council sit in on that too, or just have those groups meet first?
Have
and then-
those
Okay.
groups meet, otherwise the group is too big, and then
Okay.
have them give us recommendations.
Everybody else okay with that? Yeah. Okay. Thanks. That's great. I guess I'll just also say, we had a conversation today about Parks and Rec and how hard it is to supervise and to program for kids, especially in the out times. And I think there was a lot of positive conversations around maybe as a community, we can work with organizations like outside necessarily of the city. Because again, space and time and just more and more and more, like a Boys and Girls Club or YMCA or any other after-school program in another community. I would just love to encourage the community. I don't know if this is something we want to take on, but any role we can play in support of a group that comes forward in, some quasi manner of city and county would be just a fantastic thing. The other thing I just wanted to bring up real quick, I wanted to get everybody's opinion on this. CAS, Colorado Associations of Ski Towns, is coming and having their conference here October 20th, 21st. It's a Thursday and Friday. It is when we have our second meeting in October. As the host city, usually all the council people come. I'd invite everybody actually to come to any of the CAS meetings. They're really fantastic. I get a lot out of them. It is all like communities like Glenwood Springs. But that conference is the Thursday and the Friday, and the reception is Thursday evening. So I understand there might be some things specific to maybe a city manager conversation, but I don't know if we can just cancel the second meeting. Can we cancel or move the second meeting of October, or maybe gavel in, gavel out kind of thing?
There's 5 Thursdays.
That's September,
Oh,
I
that's
think.
September.
I think.
Very short, maybe, do it earlier.
Well, do we need anything? Is there anything that we have to hit, or can we do like a work session on the budget at another time, or extend another evening?
It's probably the only thing we have, Jonathan, is we need to do a budget hearing. Public budget.
And that can't be done the first weekend of November?
I believe the charter requires it to be done in October, but we do have, you guys could shift it to the 4th Thursday of October. 27.
Would that be okay to just do a brief budget hearing on the 27th, so that could allow it?
To move that later October meeting to the 27th.
Or is there a way that we could have that meeting? I will second that, but is there a way we could also have that meeting at 5 o'clock on that Thursday?
Yeah, because you're gonna see a resolution on the next meeting, the reset meeting.
Well, guys,
I would make a motion to move that motion from the meeting from September 20th to the 27th at October at 5 o'clock.
Yep.
I just know
So-
that I would be out of town there.
Sorry, Tony, I misspoke. I was talking about moving the meeting on the 20th from 6:15 as the normal time to 5 o'clock. and having
Okay,
the
I
meeting.
changed I withdraw my previous motion and move to
That way
change the
the same day.
motion. The motion was, the meeting will remain on the same day, but we'll move it up to 5 o'clock.
Okay.
Second.
Thank you.
And then run till 10.
But it's, that's okay.
Okay. It's been motioned by Tony. Is that,
Seconded
is ever, okay. So we're in a quasi agreement of that.
Oh,
I know, I'm about done with you.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries in a quasi judicial manner.
Steve has a 2-hour PowerPoint.
you're one short.
Am I really?
You've got one to go.
All right. Is there anything else quasi? I'm there.
That doesn't count.
I hope that we sanction Mrs. Musso for taking my charger.
I don't think there's anything productive that I could do at this moment, so maybe we should gavel out.
Can I just say, thanks this morning for the budget stuff. Next meeting, we're gonna do general fund A and I capital projects. Then we'll submit the budget in the first meeting in October. There's nothing more important to me between now and then than to make sure you guys have a chance to ask questions and understand the budget. It's a complicated budget. It's a long budget. But by the time we get to where we're ready to submit, I will make whatever time you guys would like me to make if you want to come in and talk about the budget.
Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. Can I get a motion to adjourn? Is there a second? All those in favor? Any opposed?
You missed it by one.